Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. Today's video is my alien abduction experiences. Before we get into that, I just want to plug Patreon. If you'd like to support Astral Club and help make these types of videos possible, there'll be a link in the description. And you get your videos early on Tuesday rather than having to wait until Saturday. And then you get a direct email through Patreon to me so we can talk and I can answer questions and comments without having to go through the whole comments section thing. Okay, let's get started here. Now, before I get into the actual alien abduction experiences, I think it's pretty germane to comment on this recent quote unquote UAP unidentified aerial phenomena announcement, or what I consider a non-announcement. I had a number of people ask me before this occurred weeks ago, hey, could you astral project and let us know what kind of cool stuff they're going to be releasing? I didn't bother to respond, and I certainly didn't bother to waste an astral projection because I knew precisely what they were going to release and what they were going to say. As a matter of fact, in my head, this is how the meeting went. Now imagine yourself watching a Pentagon office somewhere with a bunch of generals seated around it. And I see like the head general saying something like, okay, we have to address this whole UAP, UFO phenomena thing. How should we handle it? One of the generals would probably pipe up and say, well, we could just tell the truth. Everybody cracks up around the room. And the head general would say something like, haha, Jenkins, you're too funny. You're buying the first round tonight for that one. But seriously, what should we tell the U.S. public? I could see a smarter general saying something like, why don't we tell them what they already know? Head general probably listened and say, interesting. I'm listening. Look, I mean, we've been telling the public for years that these UAP sightings were just marsh gas, weather balloons, or drunk white people living in trailer parks, right? But now everyone knows that these UAPs are real. So there's been a number of pilot recordings that were released, then those recent Navy incidents, not to mention the thousands of sightings over decades. I mean, these craft, we've clocked them going thousands of miles an hour, then stopping on a dime or making sharp 90-degree turns. Any conventional aircraft in our inventory would disintegrate along with the poor pulped pilot. So the head general would be like, okay, so we admit they're real. Then we tell them that we don't know if they come from Russia, China, or where they come from. We'll say we're investigating all the possibilities, and we'll get back to you when we have more facts, which will be never. Let's hope. If the truth ever does come out about their whole extraterrestrial origin, we'll just say that knowledge was limited to those with the need to know, and the American public just didn't need to know. Head general would say, brilliant. I'm putting you in for another star. Now, that's what I call in the box thinking. So, obviously, I had a little bit of fun there. But believe me, whatever meeting they had to discuss this whole, unidentified aircraft release probably went something very much like that. If you expected more than the same old crap, I'm sure you're disappointed. But quite frankly, I never expected more than precisely what we got, which was just an acknowledgement of something we all knew anyway, that these things aren't just marsh gas, they're not just weather balloons, and they're not just the ravings of some poor, insane guy hoveling somewhere in his mobile home court park. So, anyway, I figured I'd want to address this because it's kind of germane to what we're discussing here today. Now, I have not discussed these experiences with anyone outside my wife, and I haven't talked about it even with her for over 30 years now. I'll explain to you what happened. Now, strictly speaking, these aren't astral projections because it was a physical situation. However, it all began with an astral projection. And this happened towards the end of the 80s. And I was quite active in exploring alien phenomena in the 80s. And I was busy trying to locate the Greys again when I was astral projecting, and I stumbled upon a group that is not the Greys. It's not related to them in any way. It's not the Nordics. It's a group that is self-assigned to watch over any interested parties in Earth and to make sure they abide by certain universal laws in that they don't violate them. I don't pretend to understand the vagaries and the ins and the outs of these laws. Now, I did have some discussion with them, and they told me a lot of information about themselves and what they were doing there. But they also said that I could not reveal this information to anyone else because it wasn't yet the proper time. Now, I'm sick of hearing that kind of thing. So inside, I was thinking to myself, well, I'm going to promise them whatever they want, but I'm going to release this information. And as I was thinking this, I kind of lost consciousness. And when I awoke, I was going back into my body, but one of the members of this race were there in my bedroom as I was reintegrating. And I felt an extra weird sensation that was coming from the center part between my eyebrows. And then I was back in my body, and he was gone. Now, as I came back to normal consciousness, inside me there was this weird message that was playing in a loop that told me that I must not betray any of this information at this point in time that I had gotten from them, in that there would be consequences if I did reveal any of this information. I'd heard this kind of stuff before. I heard it from the Greys, certainly, and it never stopped me from talking about them. So, I guess I waited, I don't know, a number of weeks. And I had a little micro recorder back then that I would keep in my car. And when I was driving, I would sometimes dictate into this micro recorder various astral projections or any other experiences that I had that I thought might be of interest, that I would want to write in my journal and perhaps reveal in a future astral projection seminar. I used to put on these types of seminars. Now, I was driving down a road called Street Road in Bensalem, Pennsylvania. And this was around 1988, once again. As I recall, It was in the summer months of 1988. And I know Street Road, that sounds like a very inventive, very creative name for a street, but that is the name. And as I was driving down and reading this particular experience into this micro recorder, there was a shimmering in front of me. And for a second, I was frightened because I thought I was losing consciousness. And that had only ever happened to me once before in my physical body. And that was when I was just a kid and I'd gotten a cortisone shot and I was walking back from the doctor. And it was very hot in the summertime. And there must have been some sort of reaction, so I started fainting and I actually lost consciousness. And this experience reminded me of that. Of course, I was frightened because at the time, while I was recording this, I was also driving down Street Road, probably going approximately 45 miles an hour or so. And so I was quite frightened. Now, this shimmering, this weird effect lasted a few seconds, and then I found myself violently rocking in my car as I was driving in what now appeared to be an overgrown field. I slammed on the brakes just by instinct because obviously I didn't know what was going on. And I brought the car to a stop. I sat there in my car in shock for at least a minute, trying to process what the hell was going on. Now, my first reaction was, is this some sort of a weird unconscious dream? Did I have some sort of a spontaneous astral projection? But I immediately dismissed those ideas because I was in my physical body, and even stranger, I was in my car, and it was real. Okay, I could feel the hot metal underneath the windshield and the steering wheel. So I put the car in park and got out just to survey to see what was going on. I didn't see any trace of human civilization. And this part of Street Road has businesses on either side, and it's a rather large road with several lanes on each side. But instead, now I was in this field with some trees that might have been part of some sort of forest all the way in the background. I didn't know what the heck happened, but I went over and I turned off the car because I started thinking like a survivalist. Who knows if I'm going to need this gas or the heat from this car or something. I shouldn't just waste it. I knew I didn't want to go driving because the car that I had, it was not an SUV and it wasn't designed for riding in any kind of a semi-meadow situation. So whatever value it was to me would have been just for the shelter. So, like I said, I turned it off, closed the door, and I went for a short walk. And as I was walking in a straight line away from the car, my foot scraped the dirt a bit, and it kicked up some black stones. And as I went down to pick them up, I could see that they weren't natural. They were the remains of some sort of a black-topped road. That's when it occurred to me that perhaps I was in some sort of a future, perhaps far future, and I had somehow been projected here with my physical body and my car. And I had no idea how I'd gotten here or what was going on. I didn't see any signs of life, and finally I found evidence of what might have been a road. Perhaps I was still on what was once Street Road, but it was now buried under a certain amount of soil, and grass was growing out of it. And so after walking a few more blocks, I just decided to go back to the car. I didn't know what else to do. About an hour or so had gone by, and I got back into my car and just started thinking, what the heck am I going to do? Uh, and I looked down at my micro recorder, and it was still running, and I turned it off. And as soon as I turned it off, things began shimmering again. And then I was back on the modern day street road with my car off and a truck bearing down on me, pulling his air horn. Luckily, he was able to swerve, and I was able to recover from now another shock to my system and to start the car up again. I believe he gave me a nice little gesture out of his window. He probably thought that a busy road was a bad place to park your car. I still was in shock. I drove home, and later on, I told my wife, who was not yet my wife at that point, was my girlfriend, what had happened and just how inexplicable it was. Later that night, I had another astral projection, and I found myself pulled back to that same strange vessel of that race. And I was told that I was being watched and that I had been warned not to share that information, and that my experience was a warning of their power. They would not, put up with that type of disobedience, or there would be consequences. For instance, being banished into a far future with, without a lot of civilization around. So I left it at that. I thought it best just not to think about it. And about 5 years went by. I hadn't had any more alien experiences of any kind. As a matter of fact, this whole experience got me off of the whole alien thing. I went off and started doing other things. I wanted nothing more to do with it. I guess I started feeling a little safe, like perhaps they'd forgotten me, and that maybe it was time to start talking about it. So I was in a hotel in the Poconos in Pennsylvania, and this was the late fall, as I recall, and it was about 1993. This hotel was up on a bit of a small mountain, and it overlooked a marshy area with a central lake. And I noticed this as I was walking in to check into the hotel. I really didn't give it any more thought than just that offhand look as I was walking into the lobby. Now, I checked into the hotel a little early because I had gotten back there earlier than usual because the job that I was working on got done a little bit earlier. And I took out some paper from a notepad and decided that I was going to write down some of those experiences I had with that mysterious race, and to talk about some of the things, some of the truths that they had told me. And I wrote page after page after page until it was time to eat dinner and relax for the night, and just decided to go to bed sometime around 11 o'clock or so. Now here I am in this hotel, asleep in my underwear, having some sort of a peaceful dream or so, when suddenly I find myself immersed in dark water, soaked. I plunged down. It probably was somewhere around 8 or 9 feet of water, just enough so I could not stand. Now, I had dropped a number of feet before I went into the water. I didn't just materialize there. So I had some sort of a shock of inhaling, and a bunch of water had been swallowed at the same time. So I fought my way to the surface, uh, once again, in some sort of shock and panic. And I managed to get to the surface to find myself in this relatively small pond. Somehow I pulled myself together after a few moments and started swimming for the shore, parting a bunch of reeds and what have you, till I finally got to a place where I could stand in this mucky mud and get out of the water. The area itself looked different, but it still had that small kind of mountain where the hotel had been, but there was nothing there now. Nothing at all. And just like before, I looked around. Now it was dark, so it was harder to see, but there was no sign of life. And luckily, whatever season it was at this point in time, it wasn't cold because I was soaking wet in my underwear, and the weather was at least tempered at that point, so I wasn't shivering. But imagine yourself in my place. It's dark, you're soaking wet in your underwear in this weird abandoned place, thinking to yourself, oh no, I wonder if it's them again. Because I started writing that information. What if they leave me here? I'll leave behind my wife and my new daughter, and abandoned here in my underwear in some weird future. I was quite frightened, to say the least. Luckily, I didn't have long to wait. I felt that weird type of shimmering again, and I found myself back in my bed, soaking wet, at somewhere around 3 or so in the morning. Of course, I was recovering from shock once again. I got out of bed and just tried to. Was this a dream? What was this? But I was soaked. The bed was soaked. Okay, and it was quite obvious that something had happened to me. When I figured out, geez, which end was up, I took off my clothes, went in, took a shower. There were some pieces of weeds and whatever that were on my underwear, and that was just further proof that I hadn't dreamed the whole darn thing. I took a shower. I hung up my wet underwear in the bathroom, and after I dried off, I went back to my bed, but it was soaking wet. What was I going to do? So I got the brilliant idea to grab the blow dryer, and for the next hour I sat there blow drying the bed so that it was dry enough so I could go back to sleep. I remember I'd been doing this for about 45 to 50 minutes. I was almost done when someone started hammering on the wall next door. He must have been thinking, what maniac is blow drying his hair for almost an hour between 3 and 4 in the morning? I can only imagine what he must have thought. Well, I somehow managed to slip into a troubled sleep until my alarm woke me up. When I got up, I destroyed all of my notes, and I said, I'm not going to take this risk any longer because, this has now happened to me twice, and they brought me back each time. I am not going to be abandoned in some barren future because of this. So, it's been 30 years now, almost, since my last experience. And now I thought perhaps it's time to at least share this. Now, I'm hoping that either A, they have forgotten about me, or B, that since I'm not getting into what they actually told me, I'm only telling you about my quote unquote abduction experiences, that I won't be in trouble. So keep your fingers crossed, because if this is the last video I ever make, then you'll know I screwed up. Okay, guys, I hope you found that interesting. It's something that I haven't shared in so long, and I know it's not, strictly speaking, astral projection material, but it started because of astral projection, and I thought, this whole, UAP release from the Pentagon, it just kind of reminded me of all of this, and I thought it might be interesting. So, if you liked it, please hit the like button, share it with those of like minds. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Please leave your questions and comments. I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say. And if you want to support Astro Club on Patreon, the link will be in the description. And as always, I'm Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.